You found it, the home of red-blooded American patriots. The Patriot Review with Jeff Wagner starts now.
Hello, Patriots. Welcome to episode 126 of the Patriot Review, freeing criminals at the expense of your safety. More and more, the left is pushing for no bail, zero bail. As you know, we saw this rampant during the Antifa BLM assaults, and it's been a problem, a growing problem ever since. Sat down with Mr. Ken W. Good, who is an attorney, and I'm going to show you the interview. We'll take a break in the middle, and may say a few things in addition to that, but otherwise the interview is rather extensive, and we just had a great conversation, so I'm just going to get right into that. I'd like to welcome Mr. Ken Good to the Patriot Review for the first time. Ken graduated from Hardin-Simmons University in 1982 with a Bachelor of Arts degree, received a Master of Education degree in 1986 from Tarleton State University, a part of Texas A&M system. In 1989, he received a law degree from Texas Tech School of Law, where he was made a member of the Texas Tech Law Review. Ken has argued cases before the Supreme Court of Texas and the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, along with numerous courts of appeals, including the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. Ken is married and has two daughters. Ken, I have three daughters that are wonderful, wonderful people. I'm sure that, you know, being a dad is probably the joy of your life as well, but you got quite a list of accomplishments there, and I welcome you to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I think being a father of daughters is something you don't understand. I always say that God gave me daughters because he knew how competitive I was growing up. And so he knew I could not be competitive at the dance recital like I could be at the basketball tournament.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. So we're, are you in Texas right now?
I am.
Okay. So I lived in Texas for a few years. I love the state. I didn't like the humidity. I was in Houston, and it got to me a little bit. But I'm back up here in Wisconsin. It's native of Wisconsin, and enjoying the seasons, not enjoying the winters. But it's a pleasure to talk to people. And I talk to people from all over the country, and matter of fact, around the world, as my blog and podcast grow. And it's amazing to me how many people from the outside of the United States of America are focusing on America and what happens to us as a nation, primarily because of the political situation that we find ourselves in. But one of those things I think people are looking at all over the world is how we have, over the past few years, even more strongly than we have ever seen, been releasing criminals back on the street. And study after study is showing that this is not a good idea, that the recidivism rate is high, that, if anybody sits down, you said a word before we started, common sense. You said that before we started recording. If anybody just sits down and looks at things from a common sense viewpoint, they see that when they watch the true crime show, they always talk about how criminals escalate in their crimes, and that they may start as a peeping Tom, but they end up as a serial rapist and killer. And it just doesn't make sense to me that there's a party of politicians who just want to release people back on the streets with zero bail, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So give us a brief history of how this issue has come front and center in the United States, if you would.
Well, if I was going to say, how do I think we got to where we are now, I would say if you go back 4 or 5 election cycles, you would, for the presidential elections, you would see, I think, where one party would kind of do something, 6 months before the election to hype up their supporters, make them mad. And it was because we were at a point that they had to have their supporters turn out in higher numbers for them to win. And so that's how I think you could say it started. It started with, you're not being treated fairly. You need to be angry about this. But at that time, when it started, it was just rhetoric. So when the election was over, then we would just go back to normal. And then you started seeing after a couple of cycles that their supporters got mad because they were just using it as a rhetoric and never pulling through and saying, oh, we're going to do all these things that you've been mistreated about. And so I think at one point in time, that particular party or one party started electing people that their intention was to do what they said they were going to do, even if it was just rhetoric to begin with, even if it really didn't make sense. And so I think there was this big push, and I think it's a coalition, just like to get a majority, you have different people that believe in getting to that result. But I think there is a part of that coalition that is wanting bail reform, criminal justice reform, that really at the heart of what they want is decriminalization. I mean, you just can't look at the last 4 or 5 years and say that what they're really pushing is not just decriminalization. And they will not say that point blank. Look at Proposition 49 in California. They don't come out and say, hey, would you vote in favor of us just decriminalizing theft below $950?
Yeah, all right.
And so what they do is they say, oh, we're going to change some felonies to misdemeanors because it's good. It's great. It'll allow these people to find jobs and it's good for families. And so it gets all this support. And then once it passes, then you've got your urban area DAs that say, okay, we're no longer going to prosecute that. And so now you see the consequences of it. You've got stores that can't maintain $25,000 a day in shoplifting. Now you've got businesses closing because they can't provide a safe work environment for people that in that area. And you have politicians who are acting, oh, like this is just incredible. How can Walmart, how can Walgreens, how can whatever store of the moment close and turn their backs on our citizens? Well,
Right.
they're not the ones turning their backs on them. I mean, if the local government won't protect their property tax base and protect the business from protests that turn into violent and then they don't build back, what would you expect? And so I think we're at the point where all this rhetoric has created a mob, and a mob, once it gets created, can't be controlled. And so I think we're seeing that today, and it's not sustainable. It can't continue. And there will be a result. It's just a question of what will the result be. You see the pulling back across the United States, but you still have a few areas, a few hot spots still pushing to make it even worse.
Well, it's absolute nonsense. I like to go to, these politicians' homes and just clean them out, right? Clean them out and see if they just, if they don't put a security system in, if they don't ask for help, if they don't just go to the store or buy some more stuff for me to steal tomorrow. I mean, it's so blatantly ridiculous, patently ridiculous, that it just is mind blowing that people would actually tolerate this. And in your comment about the mob can't be controlled, I think we saw that with BLM and Antifa, but there was also no will to control them, right? And I think that's part of the problem here as well, is law enforcement being told basically to stand down with these types of behaviors. And the American people are the ones that pay for that, right? So
yeah, but you're seeing the American public turn around. I mean, you're seeing the Budweiser, Bud Light backlash, the Target backlash. It's almost like suddenly the majority has grown a backbone, and they've just kind of said enough is enough. And can you imagine the businesses? If you were a business today, how can you navigate these woke waters today, where you have all this pressure to be to acknowledge these minority groups, and now if you're at the risk of ruining your brand if you do, and so it's an interesting time that we live in.
It is that, I guess I'm maybe old school, and this is why I'm not a CEO of the corporation. I would just tell them to go to hell. I would tell them.
Well, but even that, you can trace that back, the Rainbow Coalition, Jesse Jackson, Reverend Sharpton, where they would go to people and say, you're going to make contributions to my organization, or we're going to call for, everybody not to buy your products. And so it was kind of like a protection scheme. And that's really what we have going right now, this protection scheme that's gone too far.
Right. And mob, again, mob is a good word for that. I mean, that's the mob mentality. That's the mafia taking over the city streets when in the old days and making businesses pay protection, same type of deal. Uh, so the other aspect of this is we don't even know who's coming into our country today. And I know you correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is that when someone who's in our country illegally commits a crime, they also are released in
Oh,
large
yeah.
numbers.
Yes, and it depends on where. We've been through this long period right now where, we have sanctuary cities, jurisdictions will no longer cooperate with ICE. And so, it's like they'll fight harder for an illegal alien who commits a crime to stay in the country than for a citizen of the United States to stay in the country.
Again, because of the woke mindset there, right? I mean, that's
I don't really understand what's going on there.
mhm.
I think it's political. I think, we're at this point, and you can see it in Texas probably better than in other parts of the country. But, for the Texas has always been a conservative state. Even when
Mhm.
it was a Democrat state, it was a conservative state. And so, but then, one party decided they didn't have room for conservatives anymore. And so, but for a Democrat to run statewide in Texas, they have to raise money. To raise money, they have to take positions that push them further and further to the left that are contrary to running in a conservative state. So they're able to raise the money, but then they're no longer electable in the state of Texas. So to be able to raise money, you have to take positions that then will make you lose in Texas by 13 points. And I think that's kind of a good example of where we are. If you want to raise money to take any office, really either party, you've got to state positions that are then supported by the money people of that party.
And that makes a lot of sense. And that's the reason why people like Ted Cruz have such a difficult time and in getting reelected. And I know it's gotten kind of um, more and more difficult for him as time goes on as well, because he's definitely a target because of what he says and how outspoken he is. But so let's talk a little bit just in very, very basic definitions, so anybody who isn't familiar with this issue can get familiar with it. So when you say no cash bail or zero bail, what is that referring to?
Well, we call it simple release. So it's called different things in different parts of the country. In California, it would be called zero bail. In New York, it would be called release without bail. In Texas, it would be called release on a personal bond. All of those things mean the same thing. You're being released on a promise that you will return and nothing else. A pinky swear. In Texas, you can have a $20,000 personal bond. All that is a number tied to your personal promise. It didn't cost you anything to get that bond. So all those different types of releases, we call those simple release. And then what the bail industry, that is, we call that, a surety release or a bail bond. And then there's cash bonds as well. Those are probably the three different types of release that we use across the state across the country. So simple release, surety release, and then cash bonds.
So is a surety release based on collateral assets, or how
It
does that
can
work?
be. A surety release means that you're being released by the private industry through a bail bond. So you just have a contract. They post the bond for you for the full amount of the bond. And if you don't show up, then they have to pay that to the court. If it's a large bond, they may require security. But, what we keep forgetting is that bail is what security, what promises you're going to give to the court, or what assurances you're going to give to the court that you'll return to answer the charges pending against you. It doesn't have anything to do about innocence or guilt. It just means, what are we giving you to assure you that we're going to show you that we will come back. Before the Magna Carta, the king could just hold you until your case went to trial. And if he never went to trial, he held you the rest of your life. The Magna Carta 200 years ago was the first document where the king allowed or put restrictions on his ability to hold somebody. The concept of bail arises or dates all the way back to that. That's the roots of the current bail system. So, people complain about the private industry, but the private industry is normally the only constitutionally protected right to release that you have. I mean, if they can take away your right to a private surety bail bond, which is the only constitutionally protected right, well, then they can take away everything else because it's just created by a statute. And
Yeah.
we know that for sure because it was litigated during COVID.
It also allows for the weaponization of the system, who gets it and who doesn't, and
Yes.
whether they follow my beliefs or they don't follow my beliefs. And the J6ers, I think, are the prime example of that, as being political prisoners in the United States.
Yes, I do think we are entering into a period of politicalization of our criminal justice system, which it's probably we've always had some level of politicalization, but it's just extreme right now. It's pretty bad.
Blatant. It's blatant, in your face, undeniable, in my opinion. But so across the country, to what extreme of a crime does this go to, where people are being released? Does it generally cut off at a certain level, or are we seeing, people even who commit violent crimes being allowed to walk?
You're seeing it for everybody. In Harris County, they have a Crime Stoppers is maintaining a list. They're like over 150 now, probably closer to 200 of people who've been released on a personal bond or a very low bond for capital murder, and then they murder somebody again. And so it's kind of I've been referring to Harris County as you get one free murder before they're going to hold you. And what's changed is historically in Texas, we have several offenses listed in the Texas Constitution where you can be just denied bail. And so capital murder is one of them. So if you were arrested for capital murder, you weren't released. You were held until trial, because we thought that crime was so severe that the Texas Constitution allowed you to be held until trial. Well, right now we're not doing that in Houston, because we've implemented some bail reforms in Houston by court order, and they're still in place, even though the decision has been reversed, because politics won't allow the politicians to go and have that settlement vacated.
And that new approach came out of the Texas legislature?
No, it came out of a federal case filed in Houston, and that's why it only applies to Harris County. It started out by being applied to just misdemeanors. Although, we have examples all the time where, a felon gets released on $100 bond. I mean, last week in the press, there was a defendant who broke into a police car and tried to steal weapons, and he was arrested, and the magistrate gave him a $100 bond. And then when he got to court, they revoked his bond and changed it to $40,000. Now, there's something going on if the magistrate thinks that a $100 bond is a proper bond for that offense.
Yeah, right. And of course, if he would have went on to shoot somebody, the gun would have got blamed, right? Wouldn't have been him, God forbid.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm just so critical of. If you're not going to be able to protect me, then at least allow me to have the tools to protect myself. And we seem, especially in our urban areas, that we seem to be living in a time where they are not able to protect me, but they don't want me to have the tools to protect myself either.
Yeah, and what people don't understand, I mentioned the international eyes on the United States. What people don't understand about the United States is that the country is so vast that you have to be able to defend yourself in these rural areas where it's 43, 45, 50 minutes for police to respond. The police there will tell you that you're the first line of your own defense.
Mm-hmm. And I've been thinking about that recently. I mean, if you go back to the Old West, were the criminal laws meant to protect the public or to protect the criminals? Right. Because if you think about it, we had these mobs that would just go in and they'd fix the problem. I mean, we're kind of getting really close to a breaking point where we're going to have that mob mentality if we don't already have it in some parts of our country. And so, I think that the criminal laws, to a certain extent, are there to protect the accused. And if we don't, if we're not going to follow law and order, then we're going to go back to that mob mentality if we're not careful.
Yeah, so I think that that's absolutely right. Further, I think that's what they want. I think they want to be able to say that, look at these crazy mega people, look what they're doing now, so that they can increase their own authority and power over us. Just my opinion.
Well, I think it's chaos. That's what they want. Chaos will push for decriminalization. And then once we have decriminalization, then we can prosecute only the ones that we want to prosecute. And if that's political and we decide who we're going to prosecute based on politics alone, well, then that would be okay too under a chaos theory.
Right. Do you think that we have the laws in place that we need to have in place? And it's a case of if we only followed our laws, we would be a much safer country? Or do you think that it's gotten so far down the path that now we have to work on removing these laws or obstacles that are really putting us at risk?
I think in Texas, we've got the laws that we need. We just need to follow them. Now, that's not true in California. And I'll give you an example. So like the reforms that they've done on misdemeanor cases in Harris County, they're causing an 80% failure to appear rate. And what that means is 80% of the time the criminal doesn't show up for court. And that means you can't get those cases resolved. And then you end up just having big pressure to dismiss the cases. And I thought, well, okay, that just has to be a one-off. Well, I talked to a DA in California, and he said they use that system statewide for misdemeanors there, and they're getting the same result. 80% of the people who are in misdemeanor court fail to show up. Well, in California, that they're going to have to change the law before that is going to improve. I mean, that's just career criminals, gangs, and organized crime are taking advantage like you wouldn't believe of misdemeanor crimes, and they're making a killing off of it.
Well, my cousin and I, we both play guitar, and we joke, back and forth, like, well, hell, let's move to California. We could steal a guitar a day, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane. And so of those numbers that, are that 80%, is there a way to determine who's here illegally and who's not? I mean, is it too early in the process that those folks that we don't know if they are legal or not, or is it?
I don't think we're tracking that. You know what? I have not looked at that data, so I don't.
Yeah,
but I don't believe that there's a large number of people that are here illegally. But I do think that we're creating this segment of our criminal. Well, wait. Let me start a different way. Someone made this argument that there is a city within a city when you're in the urban areas. You got this city of criminals that are living inside the larger city. Mm-hmm. And that group is the ones that are committing, the vast majority of the crime. And it's with recidivism, they're the ones doing it over and over and over. And what I think of the criminal justice system is I think of it impacts them if we're strict on our enforcement, but it also in fact impacts the gray area of the people that live between the two cities, because there's in the gray area, there's people that are making decisions every day over whether to be law-abiding citizens or to join the crime sub-city based on what they're seeing. And right now I think the city within the city is growing and growing rapidly because in our urban areas, criminals or the people that live in the gray area are saying there's no consequences if I commit crime.
Hello, Patriots. Now you can show your trust in Trump and your faith in Jesus at the same time. You can purchase the Trust in Trump 2024 Have Faith in Jesus tee at redbloodedpatriots.com/shop.
Our world is full of electromagnetic fields that, even though we can't see them, are affecting our bodies, our sleep, and even our ability to think clearly. The advent of 5G is only making this worse. There is an answer. Visit Fix the World by clicking the link in the Patriot Review show description below to view natural products that can actually protect you from EMF and 5G and even improve your sleep. Skeptical? Get the free Dangers of EMF Radiation ebook free by clicking on its direct link, also in the show description. You can also learn more by watching episode 62 of the Patriot Review. Hey Patriots, it's Jeff Wagner. I love MyPillow products. I use them. I can say that they are simply the best quality that you will find anywhere. And you can help us all out, all Patriots, including Mike Lindell, in our mission to restore America by going to mypillow.com today
and using code TPR. That stands for the Patriot Review, so it's easy to remember. TPR. Save up to 66%. You can also order by calling 800-519-9927. Again, that's 800-519-9927. Thank you, and God bless.
Ignore the thought police and subscribe or follow the Patriot Review. It's your patriotic duty.
Hey there, before we jump into the interview and continue with that, I just wanted to tell you or remind you about the new daily show that is launching on July 25th. We will be daily 9 a.m. Central Time, and we got a lot of great stuff in store for you. Stay tuned till the end of the show, and I will show you more information about it, what some of the repeating segments or reoccurring segments are going to be, and get you ready for that. So again, there's a new channel which I can't talk about yet. The actual announcement will be made in 2 days now, so stay tuned for that on Frank Social and the other social media channels that you follow me on. And I'll keep you in the loop for sure. We'll go right back to the interview. Well, I think there's been as many as 2 million illegals just since Biden took office, and I think that's a big part of it. I mean, we need that data so that we can turn around and say, we need to follow our laws at the border as well. If we only followed our laws at the border, we would also be safer, I think.
Well, but one of the arguments on the border is, there's that one party has decided they can't win elections without getting a new influx of voters. And so I've always thought that the border fight was really a fight for voters. And so I think what that party is discovering is that the majority of the people, Hispanic people, they are more closely aligned, or they're a lot more conservative than they thought they were. So,
very strong, usually very strong.
But I think the border issue is a bigger issue because I think it's a fight for voters in the future.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that you're right. I think they were surprised, and I think that probably comes from the number of Christians that are in the Latina culture. I think that's part of it, that they are more traditional than what they were actually thought to be, and I don't. To me, that's not a surprise. But again, though, do you think that if we followed the laws that we have on the border, that would eliminate the problem that we're having with the number of people that are coming in?
Probably not, because I think that it is a bigger issue. I think we have hemisphere issues, when we're making so much more money than other countries and when it's more attractive for them to come here and work illegally, probably for pennies on the dollar compared to what they can make at home. I think that we still are going to attract more people. What scares me about that is the whole human trafficking element that's in the borders, where people are paying cartels to get them into the United States. And then especially young women are having to work to pay it back. And it's not, it's human trafficking is what it is.
Yeah.
And we just seem to be ignoring those issues. And, that's a bigger issue than criminal justice reform. That's a bigger issue than bail reform, but it has so much overlap. There's so many similarities. The policy seems to be creating chaos, and when you have chaos, you can't enforce the law. And it's almost like it's
cycle.
It's the same result. Yeah, it's a cycle.
Yeah. I will say though that Trump's border policy certainly made a large impact on the number of illegals.
I agree with that.
So I think there's a case for that, but trafficking is a terrible, terrible problem. I happen to be a media charter member of Voices Against Trafficking, and it's a problem that has just exploded, I think, in the past couple decades. It's always been there, but I think the United States the citizens of the United States, I don't think, know the true level to which it exists within our borders, and I think they'd be shocked if they found out. Um, the,
Well, look, I agree with that, and I would just say so many of us live like me. We're just so sheltered. I mean,
right.
we live in our own cocoon. I mean, I graduated from law school. I came to Tyler. I was busy in my own little world, my own little law practice, teaching at a junior college, and met my wife. I went out on a blind date, and had children, go to church. Had a daughter who needed a bone marrow transplant. So, I mean, you're busy with your own life, and you just
Right.
get so distracted. We count on our politicians to take care of those issues, and suddenly when they don't, it really is disheartening.
It is, and it's not the only problem that's brought up from the border. We all do live in our own little worlds. We all do pay attention to what affects us directly more than what could affect us or what's affecting us as a nation collectively, for sure. Another one of those issues is fentanyl, and 150,000 people dying in our country a year. This year, they're thinking maybe closer to 200,000, and that's another border related issue. Certainly don't believe that you can shut off the spigot to all drugs. I'm not naive, but it definitely would help to get that under control down there.
Well,
So
but when people tell me we have too many people in jail for drugs and we should be talking about decriminalizing drugs like they did in Portland, I'm just like, well, of course we have the most people in jail across the world for drugs. The whole world sends all their drugs to us. So of course we're going to have a larger problem than anybody else. And I read a book one time that says if you give up on drug crime, you're essentially giving up on crime because almost all crime arises from some root out of drugs.
yeah, drugs are dependency on the part of the criminal, or in some cases it's the dealers and the city within the city that you were
Well,
defining and the
let
control
me
over
make a
that.
point about the whole drugs and tie that into the criminal justice reform and even bail reform. I'm at the age where I've had family members that have had drug issues, and I have a sister who had a car accident in 1989, and she broke every bone in her face, and she started a 30-year drug addiction to
Mhm.
prescription drugs. And at the time, the poor men's drug rehab was jail. I mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so I tried very hard to get her in jail because that's what the family could afford. And the reforms that we're going through right now are absolutely foreclosing any ability to do the poor man's drug rehab. I mean, we don't hold people in jail anymore, and we, especially first-time offenders, we don't hold them in jail anymore. And if people say, "Oh, there's a first-time offender that's sitting in jail and they can't afford bail," that's just a lie. Um, and so we're making it where you can't, families can't get their loved ones turned around by using the criminal justice system. I mean,
Mhm.
the criminal justice system is turning their backs and on drug offenders because we just want them out of jail. I mean, look at Portland where we've decriminalized all heavy drugs, and now it looks like an open opium den. And I mean, they're having record numbers of overdoses every month. It's like we've decided we don't care. We just want everybody to kill themselves or
Mhm.
overdose. I mean, that may be the cheapest solution for Portland, but that sure wasn't the way they sold it, and it sure wasn't the way that it was supposed to be working. But that's the reality.
Well, people find out that there's no such thing as rainbows and unicorns in this happy little land that everybody gets along and everybody's taken care of. And I mean, the system's overloaded, and the more that this type of stuff happens, the more violent crime we're going to see, the more the overload on the mental health services we're going to see, leading to such things as more school shootings and some of the biggest and worst uh, events that we see, I think, can only increase with that. Uh, so, as just a regular citizen of the United States, what can people do other than voting to really address the issue of bail reform and making sure that people are held as they should be held?
Well, I think first of all, this is a cycle that we've been through in the past. In the '60s, we went through a period of time where we felt safe, And so as we felt safe, we were more forgiving on our criminal laws, more, I think I said more forgiving, giving people more and more chances. And so then we had more crime. And after we had more crime for a period of time, we had a backlash. I think that that's exactly what we're going through now. We're going through another period where we felt safe, and we are suffering the consequences. Because I think with the digital age, the pendulum swung very hard and very quickly to one direction. I thought that in the last election that the pendulum would swing back. It didn't, but it didn't for some reasons, like politicians were saying it was all a lie 2 weeks before the election. And so, they were giving them the benefit of the doubt. When the pendulum swings back, it may swing back just as hard. And, the last time it swung back, we got Ronald Reagan as the president, and we got some pretty heavy criminal justice laws that made us more safe. And that's the reason why we are here today. So how do people get more active? I think we hold our hold our judges to feet to the fire, and we hold our politicians feet to the fire, and we point out when things don't make sense. When they say we're going to defund the police and we're going to be safer, well, that don't make sense. When they say we're going to release more people from jail and we'll be safer, that don't make sense. And so, and we have to come back and we said that this would not make sense. And then if you did this and you did this, then now you need to either resign or we need to find somebody else. But the last thing I would say is, this is kind of uncharted territory, I think, because we're kind of living through the Venezuela coalition that's running our country right now, which is the very poor and the very rich elites. And, when the coalition in Venezuela took over, they didn't care what the person would do because they just voted for that person. Well, we're kind of at that point where we're voting for one party, no matter the scandal, no matter what they do, no matter the consequences. I'm afraid we're going to continue in that for a little bit.
Well, with today's media, you don't know what they do or what they don't do, and it's media is bought and paid for as well, in my opinion. And that's why people are looking for alternative sources for their information, and it's precisely why people like me, who's just an average person, is doing this, because I'm passionate about freedom for future generations. And a lot of people look to sources like mine because they know that when you turn on MSNBC or CNN or even controlled opposition like Fox, you're not going to get the whole truth. You're not going to get the story. You're going to get their viewpoint of the story, or the propaganda that they're supposed to tell you in order to support these changes that are being made. And
well, there's a story on Drudge or something this morning talking about they're going to file 30 to 40 something new charges against Trump. And it's like, it's almost, do they not realize that it seems like to me, just the normal public, that, okay, the first round of charges weren't enough to change the public opinion about him. So we're going to come back and file a whole bunch more and see if that's enough. It's so political. Whether they meant to be or not, it just comes across so political. And it just looks like they don't even care at this point. They're so desperate to maintain power that they don't care what it looks like.
No, they don't. And it's even worse than that. They think that we're stupid, that we don't know what the Presidential Records Act is, for example, and we don't know why they didn't choose to prosecute him under that act rather than the Espionage Act, which doesn't even apply in his case. So they look at, that's the biggest insult, and I think that what they're doing, and they may not even realize it, is that they're pushing those independent voters away from them. Because the independent voters are smart enough to see what's going on, aren't they?
I don't know. Scandal has always worked. In our elections, negative press against your opponent has always worked. So what you see right now is a push, no matter what they want to say, is a push to make Trump the Republican candidate. And then because they believe that he's the one guy they have a chance of winning with, even with Biden. Now, maybe Biden doesn't turn out to be the candidate. I mean,
No,
maybe he won't be there, but
I think they're releasing more and more on Biden, even on the historically far left media sources, because they're getting ready to primary him with Gavin Newsom. Is my belief. I think Newsom
well,
will
that's
come
what
in.
I heard too. I mean, the last thing I heard that just sounded right would be early next year he'll resign and then or withdraw from the election, and Gavin Newsom will be there ready to step in.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So, what's the future of this? You mentioned it's a cycle, but we seem to be in a little bit different situation than we've been in the past. We don't have the same we don't have the same foundation that we had in the 1980s under Reagan, as far as people who have Judeo-Christian values, and uh, that has also been under attack. The nuclear family's been under attack. So people's hearts and minds, at least more people's hearts and minds, are not in the right place than what happened back then. So with that in consideration, how do you see this cycle turning back around, and in what kind of a time period has it historically been?
Well, I would say 60s to 80s, and that was 20 years. So, but I don't think it'll take that long this time. But you know what? It may.
Hmm.
I always have hope. There's stories that I've seen where today's young people are turning towards God in greater numbers than ever.
That's
And so
good to
that's
see.
a good sign. Um, we need some kind of moral compass in this country, because when I'm faced with a some type of moral decision, I need something to rely upon. When and our youth today need that. I mean, when I am faced with shoplifting, I mean, it's easy to get. They're not going to arrest you. The store's been told their security guards to do nothing. I mean, there needs to be something that will keep you from doing it. I mean, we live in this instant gratification time, or this world where well, I want it. I mean,
Mhm.
I mean,
That's
I
exactly
mean,
right.
I even question my daughter's judgment sometimes. I was helping her to buy a car, and she's sending me pictures of BMWs, and I'm like, you can't afford to have a BMW worked on, and this one has substantially lower gas mileage than what your current car is. So
Yeah,
you're increasing your operational costs just by um, purchasing this car. No, no. I mean, look at those types of things. I mean, you
right.
and maybe we don't do a good job teaching that, but I think that we have to get judges to care about people showing up for court. I mean, that's the one thing that I think is killing us right now. And you can see the turnaround is starting, because we're starting around by caring about violent crime. Well, we need to care about violent crime. We need to care about property crime to protect our property, our businesses, taxable interest. So, the city has property values, and that's how they get their taxes, take care of people. We need to defend those property values. I mean, look in Portland, some guy sold his building because of the way that he was being treated. And he started out selling it for, $500,000, $600,000. He ended up selling it for $150,000 because property values have been destroyed. I'm, I'm hopeful, because what we're doing right now is not sustainable. It can't continue. Either we will resolve into mob violence to address these things individually, and I know our politicians don't want that. And
Well, I
so,
pray that doesn't happen as well. But
yeah, well, it will happen in different areas. I mean, we're already seeing it from the other side. Look at the George
mhm,
Floyd thing. How is that not a mob
nonsense.
violence? I mean, it was a reaction, and maybe even whipped up. But you could argue the January 6th thing was the same reaction from the opposite side, and we had to come down like a ton of bricks on them. So that's the reason why a lot of people say it's all political now.
No, I won't say that. I don't think that what they did. Here you have a
Yeah,
group of
what you're saying is what they did was not worthy of anything. Not that they're not being politically prosecuted.
no. What I'm saying is, if there are people who broke windows and who did damage, and prosecute them. But one of the guys that I have had on my show, Jake Lang, he will have been in prison for 1,000 days before his hearing. 1,000 days. And in the on the other side of the coin, they burn down buildings, they destroy city blocks, they assault people, pulling
Yeah,
them out of their
yeah,
cars. And a lot of them are not even in jail. They've never faced
yeah.
anything.
That's right. They wouldn't even file criminal charges on them.
So yeah, there's a two-tier system in my opinion is what I'm saying, and that's based on political ideology also, I think. So I hope you're right. I hope that it snaps back and that judges start to get uh upset by people not showing up and starting to demand some action. That would be great. It would be great if our law enforcement got the respect that they deserve and were able to go after the people that they've been told they can't. That's another problem, you know.
One of the things that I did was, I have work with a group. And so we just went and got the public data from Harris County, and we created a website called harriscountycourtwatch.com. And it shows you that there's like 80 something percent failure to appear rate for misdemeanor courts. I mean, the people were just crazy. There's like, that can't happen. That's not happening. And then we find out in California, it's the same there. So when you don't require people to show up, or you tie the judge's hands and you force them to give a free bond, and you don't hold them accountable when they don't show up, why would you expect anything else but people won't come to court?
So if somebody wanted to do that in their own state or their own county, where would they go to get the data they need to be able to share?
It's going to have to be a county by county basis. And so we have to get that, I'm reaching out to Bexar County in Texas to try to work with them right now to try to get that same kind of data so that we can find out and do a comparison, apples to apples, oranges to oranges. Because, the best or the lowest failure to appear rate of any release mechanism is the private surety bail system, because we work with families. And that's the reason why we have that secret sauce of why we're so successful. Any other type of release is going to have a substantially higher failure to appear rate, which means you're going to have a lot higher backlogs, because anytime you don't show up on a criminal case, your criminal case has to be put on hold because we can't go forward with your case,
Sure.
except in very limited situations until you're there to stand there in front of the judge or jury.
So who do they go to within their county to get that data though?
Well, for felonies, it's usually the district clerk, and then for misdemeanors, it's the county clerk's office. Now, a lot of times that information is online. We were able to find that information online, and so we set up some data mining processes to download it, and then we set up. The Houston Police Officers Union had done a report based upon reviewing 1 week of the data. And so we went back and downloaded 2 years worth of data, and then used the same formulas. And then you can look at any court any day for 2 years and see what their failure to appear rate was. And it was just eye-openingly bad.
Well, that approach I haven't heard of as of yet. So that's I really appreciate you sharing that. That's something that people can actually use as an action item. And that's a lot of the problem in our country today is people talk about the problems, longing for a solution, some of them, but they just don't know how to go about some of these things. And that definitely shows. It shows that we have for far too long trusted our political leaders, our politicians, and now we're paying for it. And so many people are starting to rise up and do things like you're doing, trying to get the data to actually hold people accountable. So great job on that. I really appreciate you being here. If you want to close out with anything in specific, I'll give you the last couple minutes here.
Sure. If you want more information about me and our organization, you can go to pbtx.com. We have a blog where we post or highlight important news in the bail front across the country. We also have our own podcast called The Bail Post. You can go see that at thebellpost.com, where we really are trying to be a resource. We're trying to be educational. If you want to know what the New Jersey plan is, we have a podcast on it. If you want to know how different things work in the criminal justice system, we usually have a podcast. We have a podcast about what the heck do bondsmen even do, which is one of our first episode and probably one of the highest viewed podcasts that we have. And so thank you very much for having me. And I always look forward to talking about the criminal justice system, because what we're doing right now is hurting the criminal justice system in the name of, we're reforming bail. Well, what's good for the criminal justice system is usually good for the private industry. What's bad for the criminal justice system is bad for the bail industry. So what we're really doing by attacking the bail industry is attacking the criminal justice system and undermining it, creating chaos. And what that does is put pressure to dismiss cases, and it's a de facto decriminalization, and that has to stop.
Yeah, and we're just increasing the number of victims in some of these terrible crimes. So,
well, now we're starting to see reports. We're seeing reports come out saying the more simple release you have, the more crime you're going to have. I mean, that's something that's come out since COVID.
Yeah, and you've got several in your write-up, and I trust that kind of data is on your website as well.
It is. We have an episode on our podcast about it.
So it's pbtx.com,
pbtx.com,
B as in boy, pbtx.com.
Yes.
So check it out, folks. Ken, you've been an awesome guest. Thank you again for your patience. I had some difficulties, and Ken, everybody should know, has been really gracious. And I look forward to talking to you again, and hopefully this cycle that we were talking about starts to turn even more, and we start to protect our citizens and our visitors the way they should be. So God bless you, and thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for being on the Patriot Review.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
After we watched our daughter Grace die on FaceTime, I immediately felt that I needed to go to the hospital, even though I was still pretty sick. And I met Jessica and our pastor there, and while we were in the room, Jessica and I let us spend a few moments just with Grace alone, and it was just the horrific sight to come upon was the fact that our daughter Grace was now gone. The emotions that came over the top of our minds and just our physical bodies were just unbelief. We took her BiPAP off because it was still on. This was hope and prayers that somehow she wasn't really gone. And as soon as we did that, the color of Grace changed. And we had to accept that she was truly gone.
Not one person stepped foot in that room. How can you do that? How can you allow an innocent person, a child, she's only 19 years old, die in front of your eyes? You don't do that. If you're human, you don't do that.
They knew they weren't going to convince us to put Grace on a ventilator. That means the money was going to dry up. They had to have the money. And when you follow the money trail all the way through, you see that a ventilator is about a $300,000 decision. That they had higher paying patients in the emergency room. Grace was worth more dead than alive.
We don't just need food, we need to eat food with a high nutritional value. Who wants to just survive food shortages? Let's thrive in times of adversity and lack. Optimize your daily nutrition and ensure you and your family have our 2-year shelf-stable Kingdom Fuel as a cornerstone of your emergency food supply. Don't sacrifice your health or your taste buds. Stock up on Kingdom Fuel now.
We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.
coming to you from the land of common sense and American pride. Not a unicorn or rainbow in sight. Welcome back to the Patriot Review with Jeff Wagner.
Time always goes fast on the show. We are at the end of an hour already. I just wanted to ask what your feedback is on what's happening in our legal system and whether or not you believe there's a two-tier system. You can always comment, of course, on the episode and on the page you're on, Rumble or Cloud Hub or whatever. But I'd like to get your feedback. What do you think about what we discussed today, and what do you think needs to happen in order to get our country back in shape? Really would appreciate that. I always appreciate when people make comments. Usually always. Sometimes there's, of course, the trolls out there, but whatever. They don't bother me. So on the commercial for the Kingdom Fuel, one thing that's not there is where you go. So you go to sherwood.tv/TPR. For those of you that are listening to this on podcast, you don't see the graphic. So sherwood.tv/TPR is where you can go for that. The commercial for the documentary Breaking the Oath. Now that documentary has really gotten a lot of great reviews. There are some folks that have commented, but that they didn't care for one reason or another. But it's like 8 compared to, I think we're at 28,000 right now. So if you haven't seen that yet, please check it out. You can see it on redbloodedpatriots.com. You can also go to americafirstproductions.com. It's number 1 ST Productions, americafirstproductions.com, and check it out there. The documentary itself is free, as all of the America First Productions documentaries will be. However, the only way I make money is if you buy the extended director's edition. So there is a director's edition available for $29.99. You get $10 off if you use the code America First with the number 1 ST. America First is a coupon code. You get the documentary, and it's downloadable so you can share. You also get extended interviews with the cast, and I'm going to be putting up I had to put this on hold a little bit, but I'm going to be putting up a behind the story, a director's edition behind the story. So that will be there in the near future. As you know, there's a lot going on here with the new show coming up. As I mentioned, July 25th is going to be the start date. July 18th is the announcement. You'll find out what the additional channel is for going live. I'm really excited about that. You will recognize the name behind it. And it's going to be brand new. It's going to be Christian based. It's going to be awesome. And so check that out. What I will tell you now is that we have some regular segments. So we'll have some regular people that are addressing specific things in these segments. So, for example, we have Jennifer Lynn coming on, and she's going to do a segment at the end of every show where she takes a Bible verse. It's called Let There Be Light. And she's going to bring inspiration to the end of the show, because everybody knows that we talk about very, very serious subjects, and sometimes it gets overwhelming. So I thought that would be a great way to end. We'd have Jennifer come on, and she does her own show, as most of these people on here do, but she's been gracious enough to volunteer to do that. Then my good buddy, Gunny Bud Cornwell, he's going to help me coordinate the Veterans Viewpoint. He'll be on the first episode, and that is going to be a bunch of veterans that are going to speak to what they're passionate about in the current political structure and military structure of the United States. So that was going to be really cool as well, because we get their unique perspective, and I think that they have a lot to say, and sometimes don't get enough of an opportunity to say it. So the veterans will be definitely a big part of the show. Then we have a segment called Our America by Ronald Boyd. He is a historian. He's going to be on to talk about people and events that shaped America. And he is going to be doing that to start with, like once a month, and hopefully that continues to grow. And then lastly, Perspective with Amber May. Amber also has her own show, as does Gunny, by the way. She's going to talk about some unique, she's going to give her unique insight into some things that are on her mind. So that'll be more of the current news piece in addition to what I do, and she's just going to give her perspective on things. So I really look forward to the show. Again, it's the 25th that is going to go live, and we'll have more information coming out on that. Now, this coming Wednesday, we have Clay Clark on. I have another special this week, so check that out. Also, just a reminder, you can go to franksocial.com if you want to help me out just a little bit for $3 a month for the price of a cup of coffee, probably less than a Starbucks. Per month, you can help me out and get additional comment and get first access to the documentaries I produce and some other great things. It's all pro-Christian, pro-American, and God bless you and God bless America. That is the easiest way to give me some support. And you also can give yourself some benefits as well by going to kirkelliottphd.com. 2 L's, 2 T's, kirkelliottphd.com/The Patriot Review. And you can get some great deals on gold and silver and also get a lot of free advice. So check those things out. As I said, I'll be back on Wednesday, and we'll have Clay Clark on for that show. So I'll be putting out information on that shortly. Otherwise, God bless, take care, and we'll see you Wednesday.